Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Leaderonomics Show. And today we have a super exciting episode with us. We have a guy from Australia who's joining us, Garie Dooley. Welcome to the show. Really happy to have you with us. I'm super pumped up. Just yet another author with us. Fantastic author. But Garie, tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and how you got to the space you're in today. I mean, what sort of constitutes the man?
Wow, big question, that one. Straight off the bat, Roshan, thank you for that. And you put me under the pumps, prefacing this with exciting as well.
And thank you. That's what we do with guests, right? Always put you right into the fire. Well, legendary leadership guru, keynote speaker, mentor, facilitator, coach. You got it all there. So Garie, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Roshan. Thank you for having me. Look, I started my working life as a special education teacher. So I worked with behavior problem kids, and in some pretty tough schools, inevitably you get sent to where the biggest problems are. And so I spent a lot of time, 8 years, working with teenagers, adolescents, obviously, with behavior problem challenges, and just trying to integrate them back into a system, and in a pretty rigid system. Unfortunately, the system wore me down. As we know, most education systems focus on the bell curve. It's that big fat blob in the middle. So either end, highly talented, and then maybe not so talented, maybe not get the attention that they warrant. So I went back to uni and worked full time, studied part time, did a degree in business, and managed to, long story short, get on the front end of that whole mobile technology wave. And I ended up running a big part of Optus Communications here in Australia, which is, I think, Singtel would be your familiar brand name in Asia, running retail. So I did that. So I had a whole and a few things happened in my personal life. I then embarked on a career as a regional director for a US-based HR recruitment company. So I had a number of years in with, on paper, looked like a strong corporate background, but there were moments when I'm sitting in airport lounges. It's Friday evening, it's 8 or 9 p.m. I'm looking around going, I don't know if this is me really, And so there was like a moment. I got a new leader. Sorry, that's unfair. I got a new manager, and we didn't quite connect. And I thought, we're not connecting for a reason. I sort of reflected myself. It's because I'm not truly passionate about this life. So I managed to get we sort of restructured the business. I managed to sort of exit with a little bit of enough financial security to give myself 3 or 4 months to sort of realign what I really wanted to do. So it was at that moment that I really went back to, so what do I do from here? And I realized, I sort of asked myself that question, Roshan, when have I been truly happy, like really happy at work? And to be honest, it was when I was working with the behavior problem kids. I used to love those moments, and seeing just that little glimmer of shift. It was, and I thought, but I don't want to go back and do that. But I'd had all these learnings, enormous amount. I'd made a lot of mistakes as a leader. I think I was a pretty good manager. I don't know how great a leader I was. So how can I pull all that together? How can I pull all those learnings together to create a framework maybe that I could actually take to the market and help others with? I was very fortunate too that during this time I came across 2 or 3 guys actually who were running a business called Leading Teams based out of Melbourne. Leading Teams in Australia were quite prominent in elite sport. So I joined that organisation and became the CEO. We built that business, but there was still that slight voice in my mind going, Garie, is this truly you? And again, realized it wasn't. So I've stepped out of that, and for the last number of years, I don't know what it is, 10 years or so. So I've been in this space in one shape or another for a long time. But this is now what I know is truly my, I don't know if destiny is the big passion word, but it certainly is my passion. Yeah. I have to be careful because sometimes I don't know the difference between work and play because it just sort of rolls into it.
That's good though.
But yeah, look, well, it's good for me, maybe not so good for some others around me. But I realise, I am truly passionate about helping people shift. And so shift for the positive. And so, and I have a framework now that, and I often say this, what gives me credibility, my book and my framework, it just reflects the learnings from the mistakes I made. as I say, I think I was a really good manager, and I think people get trapped in that. What I failed to recognize is how much people love being in teams. All right. They don't necessarily love the delivery of outcomes, but they love being in great teams that deliver outcomes. Being in a dysfunctional team that delivers outcomes won't guarantee that I'm highly engaged and want to stay. So that was like, it's almost like, duh, how can you miss that? You know, well, because you get in environments where all they reward are outputs, and so that's all you focus on. So yeah, so that in a nutshell, that's how I got to being here. You know, going back to, and I suppose a learning for any would-be leaders listening right now would be, you know, when you reflect and reflect on what you're truly passionate about, what truly makes you happy, what you're truly prepared to give more than you have to, is it what you're doing right now?
Yep. No, that's fantastic. And you know, Garie, I mean, you know teams, right? I mean, from the boardroom teams to like corporate teams to elite sports teams, right? I mean, you were part of the AFL Premiership winners, the Super Sheffield Shield winners, and netball to so many sports teams, and you know, we love sports, right? Because I mean, when we talk about Alex Ferguson and the Manchester United, and the Arsenal Invincibles and all these great teams of the past, you know, from Leeds to Everton to others, right? You know, we fascinate and we try to replicate, you know, the lessons learned from sports into the boardroom. Is that something that is viable? Makes sense? And for you, right? I mean, what you know, you kind of work on helping to develop these phenomenal teams, right? What's the secret, right? I mean, all of us want to be part of teams that are successful and phenomenal and high performing, right? Is there a secret to building and creating and developing and nurturing and continuing you know, being part of phenomenal teams, right?
Yeah, and you sort of answered it in some of those. In part of that question, you know, it is the nurturing, it is the development, it is the obsession with getting better. But when I was building the framework, you know, at the time, the whole good to great notion was very prominent, and not in any way discrediting someone as talented as Jim Collins. But I thought, you know, I think there's something beyond great, because what I was watching, and you know, I am a football fan. I played in national soccer here in Australia for a long time, so I've been involved a lot in team sport at a high level. And what I noticed, the great teams that, and this is going to be controversial, Alex Ferguson created a great dynasty. There's no question. I don't know if he created a phenomenal dynasty, and I'll say why in a moment. Because the great teams tend to be era based. So if you think of the great work, Roshan, that you would have done at GE, you know, you think to yourself, what did I leave behind? And was that great work, not simply because was that great work attached to me being there and some other key people being there and some other key people being there? You think, yeah, obviously it was, because we drove it great. What happened when you left? And that to me was the gap. It's like, we need to understand that great can be era based. Now, Alex Ferguson, 26 years or whatever it is of immense success. I don't know how many trophies he won. You couldn't count. But when he left, maybe not so successful. Yeah,
the big gap there.
Bit of a gap.
Today, right? Till today.
And now they're sort of reshaping. They're starting to reshape, and they're sort of trying to fill that gap. And you know, they had 5, I don't know what number is, 3 or 4 managers after him, and you know, the team was lumpy and the performance was lumpy. Well, in the phenomenal environments, that doesn't happen. And that's the bit that's the trigger for me. I kept thinking there's something more than this, because I'm seeing it a lot. And in corporate, we do see it a lot. And I think, you know, what's the difference between sport? There's a massive difference. You've got to be careful to go, oh, what the All Blacks do is what we should do. Well, be really careful about that, because sport is its own unique beast. It really is. You can't ring up, I don't know, you can't ring up the World Cup and say, look, hi, it's Garie, the coach of Australia here. We're not quite ready for Saturday's game. Do you reckon we could do it on Tuesday instead? But in corporate, you do get that little bit of flexibility. And so we've got to be really careful that we don't, there are some aspects that you can bring into the boardroom, but be very careful going, oh, let's look like the All Blacks, let's look like Man United, let's look like Real Madrid, let's look like the New York Yankees. Well, unless you're prepared to get into that environment, be careful about that. And so that, for me, that was the trigger.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, and you bring up some interesting points which I want to explore. But I mean, want to just shout out to some of the guys. Purpal, thanks for joining us. And Eric's a bit upset that you're taking a swipe at Man United, but that's okay. But your point, I think that was quite interesting about legacy, right? I mean, it's not just about success in the duration, but it's about the legacy. And I think, and that sort of triggers a thought, when you build teams, actually it's very much ecosystem based, right? And you see that with countries, and the fact that, Brazil with football and the years and years of producing those kind of great players, and now South Korea with tennis, all golf players, women golf players, and Russia with women tennis players and so on. And it sort of brings up the thing is, in organizations, as you build teams, it's not just about the dynamics of the team, but really about the structures and the processes and the ecosystem that you build, right? I mean, at least that's kind of what I get from what you're saying is more than just the interactions and the dynamics of being a good manager. It's a lot more encompassing than that. Did I catch that right?
I think you absolutely have, Roshan. And just quietly, I'm not having a go at Man United. I'm a fan. I'm the kid that grew up with George Best pictures on my wall. So I'm not having all I'm using as an example of there is something beyond great. That's all. But you're absolutely right. The other thing we've got to be careful about is that we link talent solely with creating a high-performing team. Look, it clearly helps if you've got talented people around you, without a doubt, but it's not a guarantee. So it is a total ecosystem. It absolutely is. It's, is this team, is the organization committed to being phenomenal, or even iconic, becoming that organization that others who aren't even in your segment admire, want to be like. And organizations, there's lots of stories, Disney and Apple in the old days, or maybe even Apple now, but certainly Disney and a few others that even if you're not in the market segment, you'll go and investigate what they're doing differently that create such high levels of engagement. So you're absolutely right, Roshan. It is a total ecosystem. But one of the mistakes we've got to be careful about is let's just parachute loads of talent into that team, because because what we have noticed is organizations and teams, they might not have the most gifted. They'll have good people, make no mistake, but they might not have the most gifted, but they seem to over-deliver and overperform. And you think, what's going on there? And it's because the ecosystem around it is so strong, and the framework around it is so strong, and it's resilient, and it's obsessive, and it doesn't fracture. Now, quite often we see if we just parachute loads of talent in, it does create the fracture and the discontent and the suspicion, and therefore trust gets eroded, which is pivotal. So you're absolutely right. It is a total system.
Fantastic. And I want to jump into your book a little bit, but we've got, for those of you who are watching us, right? It's a live session, so share your questions, thoughts, comments, or anything you want to ask Garie. Now's the time. Just shoot it in the comment section, and we will get it to you. We have a comment from Eric, who says some of our Malaysian corporations and government agencies are having tremendous challenge to maintain the excellence post transitioning from management team to management team. So I'm assuming your question is there a secret to managing this transition well? I mean, Garie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the trend, it's interesting, isn't it? That I'm just going to take a step back here, that yes, there is a transition from management team to management team, but it's around, and I keep coming back to your point, Rachel, within the same ecosystem, in a perfect world, it shouldn't matter. So as an organization, are we clear on what the purpose is here? Are we clear on what are the non-negotiable values? Not the words on the wall, the values. In the truest sense, the values are the behaviors that make you a valued employee. So as you transition from one to another, they hold firm. And because management is about control, management is about outputs. We all know that. Management, the great managers they've got the dials, and they twist them and turn them and flick them and pull the levers. Leadership teams are very different, and outputs are signposts for leadership teams rather than the destination points. So to that question around, well, how do we, the transitioning from management team to management team is difficult. It's not. if there is a consistency of purpose and a consistency of values. It's just a different platform to deliver all that on.
Right.
So I'd ask people to think about, if you're in an environment where you are transitioning from one to the other, let's just take a breath and let's just clarify what the purpose is, not the function, the purpose, the reason we exist. Let's talk about who we have to be every day, and let's talk about how we turn up every day, which essentially is the values. Regardless of the teams in the organization, they're just omnipotent. They're just everywhere.
Fantastic. Pertal has a comment. He's a Liverpool fan, so I think we're starting a bit of a derby war here. But I think his point is interesting. He says, look, the team gets its power from its stakeholders. For example, Liverpool's fan base kind of pushes the players to ultimately try really hard, because it's 30 years of waiting for a trophy, and then boom, it pushes the players up there. I mean, it makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's fascinating, and that is its own ecosystem, and it's fascinating. I didn't have a conversation with Jurgen Klopp, so I'm not professing to have for me to be able to call him up and, Jurg, what's going on? But I did see him speak, and we asked him, so what is this about? What is this unique thing about? How do you build the culture here at Liverpool FC? And he said, we are Liverpool. That was the answer. Now, we were at Anfield during the middle of the week. He said, and Anfield, and so much you admire about Anfield. It's only across the road from Evans Ground, from Goodison Park. But when you look out the window, there are still buildings and houses that have been there for, I don't know, 100 years maybe.
Hundreds of years, yeah.
And people are still walking down the street, and people are still walking in the pub. He said, see those people out there? That's who we play for.
Yep.
And it was fascinating. And it was fascinating. In his first year at Liverpool, he took the sign down. We all know the story. The players touched the "This is Anfield" sign. He took it down, and he said to the players, "I'm going to put it back when you earn the right to touch that sign." And that was like hair on the back of the neck stuff. He said, but the challenge we have here at Liverpool, some players can cope with that expectation and some can't. Some managers can cope with that expectation and some can't. Now, from day one, he embraces that expectation.
And if you transition that into the corporate or the board room, right? I mean, I assume this will be the community around the board, the stakeholders, essentially, right? That kind of push the organization, right? Or in terms of enabling the expectation, right? I mean, with the community having an expectation for integrity and transparency and all that, and the government and the community around, and the shareholders and investors. I would assume that's the analogy that you would take.
Yeah,
it would transition what that means in terms of the stakeholders pushing the organization to greatness.
It is, and all have a common understanding of why we are here. Because that builds, because fundamentally, we are talking about trust. And what helps us build trust, let's all agree on why we are here. Now, if you're a Liverpool fan, Liverpool player, Liverpool bootman, Liverpool manager, Liverpool director, there is a common understanding as to why we are here. And it is beyond winning leagues and championships. It is beyond that. There's a higher purpose for why they exist. And I think Jurgen Klopp in his own way was alluding to that. In the corporate environment, directors, CEOs, managers, line managers, supervisors, the person who just works 2 days a week and does whatever they do they all understand why they are here? Now, again, let's use Disney as an example. Whether you're selling tickets at the gate to Disney World or whether you're the CEO, you know exactly what the purpose of Disney is. And it's that brings everyone together, that allows people to have a share, whether an emotional share of where the team are going, where the organization are going. And it's that people challenge each other on. Now, it's where are the disconnects? When you've got directors who are focused on shareholder value, and you've got managers trying to look after their people and try and get high levels of engagement. Then there's a disconnect because we're not talking about the same purpose here. Yep. And we see it, we see it all the time, don't we?
No, that's a fair point. I want to get to your book. Phenomenal Teams: How Leaders Build high performance teams that last. And just kind of having a look at it, with here's a little poster with your handsome little mugshot there, Garie. Talk us through that book a little bit. What are some of the insights from that book?
Yeah.
And if especially I think we talked quite a bit about teams, but I mean, if there were any other key insights that you can share with us relating to the book.
And I think we have to connect the fact that phenomenal teams are led by legendary leaders. Phenomenal teams don't just pop up and they're this egalitarian. No. They do have a leader, but the leader is a unique individual as well. So he or she does have a legacy mindset. But if we go back to the fundamentals, phenomenal teams are led by many. That's how they last. Now, lots of teams, as we said earlier, Roshan, lots of teams get to the great moment where they consistently deliver success, and sometimes they go, "Oh wow, how did Man United win? The 4 major trophies? How did they? That is amazing." But then what happens? They simply use that as a platform. How can we build more leaders? How can we build the next? Like as if I was the CEO of a high performing environment, do I have the next 2 or 3 successors already lined up? And you see it so often that, and I'm sure you would have seen it in GE, and I'm sure you've seen it at Johnson & Johnson. They sort of tag early who the next 2 or 3 waves of leaders are, and that's how phenomenal teams last. So then they grow up, and I mean this in a corporate sense, not necessarily a maturation or chronological sense, but in a corporate sense, they grow up not knowing anything different. They're purpose driven, they're values driven, they're the people they groom, they're purpose driven, they're values driven. So when I step out and do some amazing things, in fact, in the phenomenal teams, the leader has to sort of get out of the way, because he or she have got this wave of the next group of leaders going, "Please get out of the way. We've got all these amazing things to do." And you sort of have a responsibility to get out of the way and go and do something equally exciting. So, the one thing I'd ask people to think about is, if anyone listening right now is a leader of a team, do you have your successor in mind? And does that successor have a successor in mind? Do you have a group of successors? What are you doing to build on this? If you think yourself, what does this team look like in 2 or 3 years' time? Are you really, really clear on where are the gaps? Who can I bring forward with me? So that is the key for me. Look, there's some basics, high levels of trust, without a doubt, because that allows the real conversations to happen. And Stephen Covey talks about it. Speed and trust go together. But phenomenal teams are led by many. And it starts with the leader. The legendary leader becomes obsessed with legacy, not outputs, not control, not being busy, not validating themselves. It's legacy. If I walked away right now, what would this team look like? What would this business look like? They become obsessed with that. So that's sort of the 20. Metaphorically, that was the 25 words or less version.
And I again, the picture you kind of paint, and it reminds me of my time, when I was building programs in GE, and also developing the talent programs. Part of the biggest, the best leaders I think I know of are the leaders that build or grow other leaders, right? And ultimately, it's an institutionalized ecosystem, right? Because building leadership, it's like you don't build a leader. You yourself don't build a leader, right? It takes a community to build a leader. It takes an organization. It takes a society. It takes kind of everybody. And it's a collective effort. To leadership development is a collective effort.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting. And I know I think there's a question here from Thomas Cavill, who says, "What piece of advice would you give an aspiring leader?" But I think he may be alluding to, look, I'm an aspiring leader, but maybe I'm not in an ecosystem that builds leaders. I may not have a manager that is looking at legacies, looking at today and results. What sort of advice would you give me if I'm not in that leader? And obviously, I would assume part of what he can do is to build his ecosystem below. But for him to go up, is there any comments or thoughts that you can share?
Look, and it's a really good question. So thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. It's a really good question. And I'm not suggesting Thomas, because I don't know, but sometimes some people, they connect, I've got to be the manager of a team to be a leader, which is like myth number one. Leadership is a choice. I don't believe, and it's only Gary here talking. I'm not the, I haven't done years and years of research, and I don't have a sample space of 5 million. But I'm not convinced that leadership is necessarily a genetic gift. It's not like being able to run fast, or you can learn, develop. You're gonna have to be brave, by the way, but you're gonna, and that might be the bit that's maybe genetic. You don't have to be the great orator. You don't have to be Richard Branson. You don't have to be charismatic. Leadership is a choice. So if we understand that, your business card tells you what you manage. Your people tell you if you're a leader or not. And so that's the first myth that I sometimes ask people to let go of. Just choose a behavior that reflects your strengths as a leader. And I know that sounds a bit grand, but let's boil that down. Do you have, so Thomas, if I was talking to Thomas, are you really, what's your purpose? Oh, well, I'm the head of marketing and I deliver that. No, I know what marketing delivers, but what's your purpose? Have there been moments in your life where you've had to step in, take action, shift people from this level to this level? And you may say, oh, actually, now I think about it, yeah, there are. Okay, let's unpack that, because inside there might be your purpose. So be really clear. What's your purpose? What's your personal why? And this is, Simon Sinek talks about the golden circles, and this is not unlike that. So once you establish your why, then who do you have to be every day to deliver on that why? Well, I have to be, brave, and I have to be caring. And okay, good. Now they're triggers for behavior. So how are you going to turn up every day? Now, and there'll be 3 or 4 core behaviors that for you as a leader are non-negotiable. We pack all of that together to create your leadership brand. Right? And I'll use the word brand deliberately, because what gives brands strength is trust. Roshan, you have a favorite brand for something right here, right now. Would that be fair? Yeah,
absolutely.
Whether it be baked beans or whether it be handbags. And the reason you trust that brand is because it delivers what it tells you it's going to deliver. Leadership is no different. So for someone like Thomas, an aspiring leader, let's start thinking about what your leadership brand is, and then step into it, because it's a choice.
And I think you get a lot more nuggets of wisdom from phenomenal teams. You can get it at GarieDooley.com. Already, Eric's like, Gary, I want an autographed copy of your book, please.
Yes, Eric.
I'm sure that'll be worked out. We have a ton of questions actually from different folks, and we're going to take a quick break now. But I just thought we'll get to one more question. Cool. Izzuddin asked this question, and you talk about why. But hey, he says, look, the purpose or why is maybe the same to everyone. For example, Liverpool, to make them the greatest club in the world. Likewise, I would assume so will be Chelsea and United and Man City and all these other guys. Yeah. But often we differ on how. And this is kind of where the proof meets the pudding, right? So is there any tips to synchronize the why and the how? Because most of the time, we see the why there, but not so much in the how. Your response to that, Gary?
Yeah, I think and again, this is a big question. It's a great question, but it's a big one, because we separate purpose from vision. And there is that limitless purpose, and there's a limiting purpose. Being the greatest football club in the world is limiting, because there'll be a point where, well, we're done. And so so that would be an exercise. That would be a thought process in itself, because in the ideal world, that outcome is a road sign. It's a traffic light. It's not the end game. How will you know we are truly living our purpose? Well, we're recognized as one of the best clubs in the world. Okay, fantastic. Signpost. Where to next? So it's around creating a purpose that's limitless. Like you'll never finish doing it. So the vision thing, in a very quick sense, what's the vision thing? What will we look like when this is all done? Okay. What's our purpose? That's very different. And so for me, purpose has a verb. Like you take action. It has an emotion that you create in others, and fundamentally, and what's leadership about? Lifting people to where they haven't been before. And so it's a great question, because it does bring up that whole notion of vision, purpose. I don't want to get too sort of semantic here. It's more than, it isn't tomato. It is, the purpose is really, really unique to you, by the way. So not every leader has the same purpose, but they do have the same intent to lift people to where they've never been before.
Wow, that's great. And I like this. I like the limitless purpose with a limiting vision. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that may be that key synchronization that happens, because when you have that unlimited or limitless possibilities, your how becomes a lot bigger. Yes. Or at least your aspirational how becomes a lot bigger. We're gonna take a short little break. Gary, it's been super exciting. We've still got another segment coming up. We've got the Tinkernomics segment, but we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna check out Nicole, probably the world's best AI personalized learning tool out there. So check out Nicole. We'll be back in about 30 seconds. So here's Nicole for you. Welcome back to the Leaderonomics Show. We're with Garie Dooley. We're having a fantastic conversation on teams, on a whole bunch of not just the creation, establishment, but also in terms of enabling legacy and enabling teams to continue to be sustained and high performing post the departure of leaders. And I think that's pretty interesting. Gary, we got a couple of questions from the audience, but one of the things that we force every guest on our show to go through is what we call the Tinkernomics challenge. And this is a quick challenge where, we'll give you about, maybe about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and each of the questions, we have 5 questions. Each of them is based on a value of Leaderonomics. So we've got 5 values, from growth to empowerment to building the future. And so you've got about 20 to 30 seconds, snap answers. Right. And we will run. So let's get ready for the Tinkernomics. All right, Gary, here we go. The Tinkernomics challenge. So again, couple of seconds, as fast as you can. Here goes. What is your favorite all-time book?
Oh, To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird, movie and book.
Yeah. Well, but that was just book, not business book, just book. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Next question: which is stronger, willpower or fear, and why?
Fear, because it's very clever the way it disguises itself. I'm not saying which is better, by the way, but fear, because it just disguises itself in so many different ways. It's such a clever little mischievous thing, fear.
So it's definitely stronger. There you go. Yeah. And it's a mischievous little fear. All right, there you go. Question number 3, and you're doing really well. How do you nurture the spirit of generosity among young people?
Sense of purpose. I keep coming back to it. If you have a true sense of purpose that goes higher than you just being whatever you are, not a tragedy, but Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones passed away yesterday, and Rolling Stones are very, very dear to my heart. And it reminded me of a quote from Kelly Slater, the world famous 11-time world surfing champion, who said, "None of us get out of here alive." And so our challenge is to make sure the footprints we leave are ones that people would love to follow. So it's that mindset.
Great quote.
That is
fantastic quote.
That is the mindset, because as soon as you adopt that mindset, it is about others.
Absolutely love it. Yeah. 2 more questions to go, and you are going to win something, Gary. Question number 4: if you could personally witness one event in history, what would you want to see?
Oh, one event in history. What would I want to see? Look, I am going to be a little trivial. There's some magnificent moments, aren't there? But I would have to say I would have to say Manchester United versus Benfica, 1968 European Cup final, where George Best scored the third goal.
All right, there you go.
I know you're expecting something deeper, but that just reflects that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Or the Beatles at Shea Stadium.
All right, there you go. True man of his heart. Well done. And no, that's fine. I mean, you're a football man, and it's George Best at his best.
Yes.
Benfica 1968, right? Right before all the other things happened to Man United, I think,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And all the tragedy that befell them. Final question, and I was thinking you were going to answer this question by saying, I want to witness the Olympics in Brisbane in 2032, but
well,
that's upcoming.
Given them in lockdown, that is too far out of my realm of imagination.
So final question, and
yes.
You'll see you get through this challenge. How would the world be if everyone could sense and read other people's thoughts?
Oh, it'd be a bit predictable, wouldn't it? It'd be boring. It'd be boring and safe. And comfortable, and that doesn't comfort and growth they're enemies. The unusual and the surprises, that what makes this life as rich as it is. So I think it'd be boring and predictable, and that's not conducive to growth.
All right, Garie, you have completed the Tinkernomics challenge, and you've succeeded in all 5 questions. And I'm going to give you a special book called Leaderonomics Leadership Nuggets.
Love it.
That's going to be sent out to you in a bit. So with that, you've done the Tinkernomics challenge. Well done.
I'm going to go through. I was hoping for a buzzer or something.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to tell my producer, where's all the sound and all?
Where's all the bits, the bells, you know? And the confetti falling down.
That's good advice on how to upgrade the show there. There's a ton of questions coming in from our viewers. Rudy, and Rudy's based in India, and she asked this question. Future successors need to look different than the current leaders.
Yes.
And I think that's I went through a big succession with Jack Welch. Being replaced by Jeff Immel, and prior to that, seeing Jack Welch being completely different from Reginald Jones, who he succeeded. How does the current leader identify what's needed of the successor? Because it's not about them being replicated; it's really about the context, and the situation, and the era. So, question from Rudy, and your thoughts, Garie?
Yeah, great question, and it's quite timely because this came up in a workshop I ran yesterday. Look, we're all familiar with the sigmoid curve, aren't we? And it's been used for everything. It's been used for market growth and personal growth. Some would suggest it reflects some people's marriages, learning, growth, maturity, decline. And it's understanding that what got you. So let's just say that Rudy is an emerging leader, and I've got Rudy in my sights as a successor. As the leader, I need to appreciate that what got us to a particular point will not get us to the next point. And so we then go back to the learning. So the learning triggers the next stage of growth, not just doing more of the same and hope. And so as the leader, I would prepare Rudy with that in my mind. What have we learned? What did we fail at? As a leader, what could I have done better? Because what did I do really well? Because I'm going to encourage Rudy to maybe adopt that in her own way, by the way, not just be like me. But there's been some learnings here, because learning triggers the next phase of growth. So there'll be some keeps and there'll be some adds. But it's understanding that the sigmoid curve is real. Growth of a team is not linear. And so it's understanding where we're at, go and then start redefining that learning growth loop, and therefore what do we need for the next set of leaders to continue the growth? It's too late when you're in decline, unfortunately. And history is littered with organizations that realize it's too late to develop a digital camera. So that would be my response. The leader has to understand that what got us to here will not get us to here. So what's the learning? How do we start to grow?
And the next question is a bit of a cheeky one, but I think it's related to the previous one. He's asking who is Alex Ferguson's identified successor, and I'm going to add to that is we know it was David Moyes, but he was given 8 months and then he was kicked out. But so I think the question is, and I've seen this, right? leaders need time, they need nurturing, they need space.
Yes.
and a sandbox to potentially grow.
Yes.
And so my question is, David Moyes was a successor. Was it right of what Man United did, not giving him the time, the space, the support infrastructure? Because it didn't seem to be he was very supported when he was started. And what, in the corporate side, what should we be doing when we have a successor and it looks like initially they don't seem to be succeeding? What should we be doing?
And that's a great observation, and thank you, Eric. I think it is. The Moyes may have been the man, but to your point, Rochelle, we don't know because we threw him into the ring straight away. If it's a gladiatorial event, off you go. No support, no training. Did not understand and it took Alex Ferguson. People forget it took Alex Ferguson 3 or 4 years to understand the culture at Manchester United. There was a famous game against Nottingham Forest where if they'd lost, he would have been sacked. And so did we give David Moyes that opportunity? To your point, I don't think so. So what's the learning in corporate? Okay, I've identified Eric as a potential successor to my role, or certainly any senior role. Okay, so what can I take off Eric and start stretching him with? And that's the bit that sometimes gets missed out, is you have to stretch and challenge the successes. You have to find ways for them to get uncomfortable. Otherwise, they're not going to grow. But if we're going to do that, take stuff off them. And I know it sounds really simple, but I've seen it. It's almost a disincentive to be anointed as a successor. Just like, oh no, I don't want any more work. Versus, oh, that is so exciting. I'm now working on really cool stuff. And so it has to be in your mind as the leader. It's sort of low risk if it fails. You'd never say that, but in your mind, it's sort of low risk if it fails, but high learning. So low risk, high learning. How many opportunities are we giving Eric, or how many opportunities did David Moyes have to do some low risk stuff, but great learning about what goes on at Man United? So make him coach of the reserves. Get him to coach under 20. Make him an assistant for 2 years. It doesn't matter if he fails an assistant. No one will know. It's those sort of things that we start to think about as a leader. Not let's give them more. I'll give them your. So, Rosanne, you're my next leader. I'm going to give you this fantastic project. You're going to get excited about it. But then you look at your diary and go, when are we get time to do this?
Absolutely. That's a great point.
So it's just understanding you have to stretch them, you have to grow them, but you have to take some stuff off them as well. Because what you take off them too, by the way, could be a stretch. Could be a stretch for someone else further down the line.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of comments. Glory Gomez says, I'm in recruitment, and one of the things I ask the management candidates on whether they have cultivated succession planning culture in their current organization, as they will tend to do the same in a new one. And I think that's a comment from him. And there's another comment, not a United fan, but I found this quote of Sir Alex Ferguson. He said, the work of a team should always embrace a great player, but the great player must always work. I guess there will always be a special talent within teams, but hard work is still there for others. And looks like you have To Kill Mockingbird is another fan of that. And I think Martin Ward wants to give a shout out to the production team. So thank you to thank our production team. And GGMU, I'm acronym, I'm deficient, I think.
I suspect that's Man United. Man United is the last two, I suspect.
Oh, okay. GG is all right. I'll not try to make things up. I see another acronym. I know this is a Liverpool one, so we'll leave. I will not try to embarrass myself with acronyms. But one of the things I think that's interesting that's being brought up, and I think you addressed some of it in your book. I believe is the fact that sometimes there's mavericks, sometimes there is what we call folks that are game changers. You have the Roy Keane in Man United, and they're hard talents to manage, but they're very important, right? To identify and to support, because the likelihood of we've seen heretics in organizations that are ostracized and thrown, and ultimately great ideas, great leadership, and great transformation comes from some of these guys. And I think you address some of it in your book. But talk us through some of the telltale signs of mavericks in the making, game changers, and how do you nurture, embrace, grow, manage them? Because these guys have the potential to become golden or rotten, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's kind of a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Talk us through, what you think your advice would be to managing mavericks and game changers.
Yeah, and I've never heard that phrase before, Roshan. I'm telling you now, I'm going to start you a heretic.
I'll copyright it.
Burns at the stake person. Yeah. So I talk about building a phenomenal team is for the mavericks, the game changers, the go against the flow guys, maybe a bit of an outsider, and you can be all of those things. But the thing that all of them are ego free. So they understand that this is not about them. And so that is fun. Yes. So you do have to push against sometimes to create phenomenal teams, you do have to push against the tide. If you're in an environment where the only thing that gets rewarded is delivery. So for example, you could be in a highly competitive sales environment. The only thing that gets rewarded is hitting your targets, and you can behave how you like as long as you hit the targets. Now, if you're in that environment, creating a phenomenal team is going to go against the flow. But what holds firm is you understand this is not about me wanting to be seen as a maverick. It's about me having to push against the system so I can get the best out of my people. And so, because we always remember how leaders made us feel, always. Whenever Rashan, if I asked you to think about, give me a leader that you would always follow, it's because there's an emotional connection to that person. And
yep,
she would have made you feel bigger and better and braver. People remember that. So it's understanding that yes, you can be an outsider, yes, you can be an outlier, but where you've got to park your ego. You've got to leave your ego in the car park. So you can be. So the Roy Keanes of this world, when I talk about football, the Roy Keanes of this world, incredibly gifted, but his drive was always about what's best for Manchester United. And if you think of the great leaders that you would follow, yes, they're talented. You don't become a CEO, or in your past, Roshan, you don't get to do massive turnaround projects at GE or at Johnson & Johnson to reframe the whole training and leadership programs at Johnson. You don't get to do that unless you are talented. However, what creates leadership, and because remember, leadership and followship go together, this is about others. This is about me creating an environment, an ecosystem that takes people to where they haven't been before. So you can't just be an outsider. You can't just be, I'm a bit of a maverick around here. Yeah, you are, but you're selfish. That's not going to work, man. So you can be all that. It's important because there are going to be times you're going to have to hold firm on what you're about. And it's understanding that I would hold firm because this has an impact on my people getting better. So it's understanding that just because you're a maverick, we're not translating to great leadership, unless you're a maverick because it helps others go to where they've never been before.
So I mean, that's interesting, and I think that brings up, we've been, it's been such an engaging conversation. I got one or two more questions, and then I think there's a couple of comments coming in from our viewers. You talked a little bit about the obsession to enable the organization to succeed, like in Roy Keane's case, right? There was this obsession to enable Man United to win, and we've seen that with great leaders. There's an obsession. I mean, Jack Welch was so obsessed at GE, and we've seen that with Tony Xia in Zappos, and an obsession to make employees feel great, and so on. And obsession can be a great motivator. And sometimes it's viewed negatively, right? But how do we harness that obsession positively and to people's advantage? Is there a process, or is there something we should be thinking about?
Yes, I know that's where I was going to go. The thing to think about, obsession does have the potential to drive it. Like I am, for example, Roshan, you may be obsessed with providing the best learning experience for your viewers. All right, I'm making stuff up here, but just bear with me. Play with me for a while. Now that is an absolute strength. But then every now and then, as a leader, because right here, right now, as the host of the show, you are the leader. You want people to follow you. You want to create belief in change, all of that sort of stuff. But it's understanding when that obsession is now out of control. So it's not productive anymore. It's getting in the way. So what do I have to do to wind it back? So it's not a strengths versus weakness thing. It's just understanding obsession is a strength. Legendary leaders are obsessed with legacy. But when does that get out of control? And there'll be signs of that. And then it's understanding that, okay, I just need to wind this back a little bit. So we need to probably lose the punishment almost around strengths and weaknesses, and understand that obsession is a strength until it runs out of control. It's at all costs is when it runs out of control. Because there are going to be times you're going to say, well, gee, this isn't productive anymore. I'm seeing the team disconnect a bit. I'm wearing them out. They're burnt out. I'm getting some talent starting to talk about leaving. I might need to just wind back the obsession. I'm not going to lose it. I just need to turn it down to 7 rather than 11. So it's just understanding and leaders, because of the self-awareness aspect, the EI aspect of the great leaders, they're looking for those cues all the time that their obsession's out of control. It's not like stop doing it. It's just wind it back, regroup, seek to understand, truly seek to understand, embrace the fact that this is about others, not about me. So when the obsession gets out of control, there's a very strong chance it's become about the leader. I'm obsessed about legacy because I want to be known as the person that left a legacy. No, that now is out of control because that's about you. That's about you.
Yep. And it needs to be about the organization, the team.
It has to be about the team, the people, the organization. Yes.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, the self-awareness, I think, is huge importance for leaders. To know when you need to notch it down or notch it up. For those who are following, who want to follow Garie, you can also follow him on LinkedIn. That's his LinkedIn profile over there. And he writes for Leaderonomics.com. So check out Leaderonomics.com. There's a big URL that you can follow. The 3 C's of team growth by Garie Dooley. So that's also available on Leaderonomics.com. Garie's been phenomenal talking to you, and I think we can go on forever and ever. We've got a couple of comments. Eric wants to have his final say. As always, Eric, in actual fact, in my limited exposure, many organizations in Asia do not put any priority in succession planning and equipping the team or organization with the elements necessary to sustain and grow the organization. I think I don't think it's just Asia, right? I think, Garie, this is something many organizations especially deprioritize in situations like now, where there's so many other things to look at and focus on. If you were to give advice to a business leader who's listening in, what would be maybe the first step they could take in terms of starting the process of looking at succession and enabling others to be successful leaders also.
Great. So just at this moment, and I know that everyone's talking about COVID, so let's put it out there and acknowledge it. So I know there's some big issue in Malaysia. It's certainly an issue here in Australia. I think we've got to, and I'm not being dismissive of the tragedy that surrounds it. Please, I hope no one hears this, but it is only a leadership moment. That's all it is. It's a gift almost. From a leadership perspective, it's a gift. But please, I'm not minimizing or trivializing the tragedy that surrounds it. Our mindset is that it's okay, I've been given a gift here. I've been given a gift to step into what I stand for as a leader. And I have written articles about if you try and become a leader right now and haven't been before, it's too late. If you try and be a leader when we all comes back to normal, whatever that's going to look like, it is too late. This is a leadership moment that you have the choice to step into. So my advice right now would be step into your purpose, your brand, how you are, start connecting. Remember, start building. Now's a fabulous time to build trust, to understand how people think, because people are looking for that connection, whether we like it or not. People genuinely still crave the connection. And yes, there are people who are comfortable working from home. That's fine. But they still crave the connection. So the one thing I'd ask people to think about is don't miss this opportunity to grow your leadership brand. It is a gift right now. If we embrace that, then clarity of purpose, what do we stand for? Who's doing really well at it? Who needs help? Who can I lift higher? Who can help me? All of those sort of things that we start to think about. This is a leadership moment that you might not get back. Thanks a lot, Garie. And, for those who, shout out again to Nicole. Check out nicole.app. You can go there. Yeah, I'm going to get on that. Check out nicole.app and you can get access to Nicole. It's pretty, or if you're a company, it's nicole.tech. Right. So with that, Garie, I just want to close with one final thought.
if you could leave us with just one little or maybe large nugget of wisdom, one leadership nugget to say this at this point in time, what would you leave us with, as a final thought or a final sort of piece of advice that you can, or gem that you can leave us with?
A gem. Well, I don't know if it'd be a gem, but what I'd ask you to think about. So potential leaders, maybe some current leaders, so maybe some fantastic listeners here who've got followers and purpose and everything else. I'd ask you to think, look closely at the present, look closely right now at the world you're constructing, and ask yourself, does it look like the future? Does it look like the future that I want this to look like? So start constructing the future now. And so the Stephen Covey thing, start with the end in mind. Okay, when I've gone, I want it to look like this. Fantastic. Are you constructing that world now? And that's why I'm saying this COVID could be a gift, because it might give you the opportunity to start constructing the world that you want to leave behind.
Love it. Thank you, Garie. And I see all the thank yous coming in from our viewers out there. It's been an amazing session. Garie Dooley, thank you again for your time. And do check out his book for those who haven't. It's Phenomenal Teams: How Leaders Build High Performance Teams That Last, and you can get it at GarieDooley.com. So check that out. Garie, again, thank you. Really appreciate your time. And for those of you, it's Thursday, a couple more days, and it's the weekend. So with that, this has been the Leaderonomics Show for you. We'll see you next Thursday, same time, same place, right here on all these platforms. So with that, goodbye, everyone.